On the last episode of the Keepsake box. I could see the anger rising within Antonio, but I didn't care. I wanted him to feel the way he had made me feel. I saw that he was searching for words, and I was happy about that. Putting him in his place made me feel confident, powerful even. Antonio sat up and leaned in close. He tapped his fingers on the table, a habit that I recognized as a sign of frustration. He was very calm and deliberate. He said, "Shelonda, I'm trying with you because I love you, but you're forcing my hand." I leaned in and attempted to imitate his tone. I said, "You can call me Star, like all the other dope boys." Antonio laughed. I could tell that he was genuinely amused. He told me that he'd always had an affinity for my spunk. Antonio addressed me in a way that only he could. He said, "I'll tell you what. Since you want to be grown, I'm going to treat you like I would treat anybody else. At the completion of my sentence, you will be required to sign over all of my businesses as well as your bar. You will advise your point A that he will be working with me when I'm released, and you will set up a meeting between he and I, one to which you will not be invited. But above else, you will replace Sharon's salon. That's what's going to happen, little girl." It was my time to laugh. "What makes you think I'll do that?" I asked. He only said 2 words, "Ask Peaches." In hindsight, I know I'd pushed him too far, but there was no turning back. My words were arrogant and smug, just as I had perceived his to be. I said, "Really, Antonio? I didn't think I had to break this down to you, but I apparently gave you too much credit. I'm not Peaches and Cream. You don't scare me. I understand that you had Peaches dancing for free to pay off a debt, but you're not going to bully me like you did her. Not only are you trying to bully me, but you're threatening me? Ask Peaches? You gonna get your goons to beat me up like they did her? Let me tell you something, Antonio. You've been locked up for all this time while I've been successfully running your businesses. How relevant do you really think you are? Your goons are my goons now. And Sharon's salon? I'll replace her salon if, and only if, you guys stay on my good side. Now, let's talk about my operation. It will be a cold day in purgatory before my point A will work with you. That I know for sure. Don't get so far ahead of yourself that you get left behind." I sat back, confident in the speech that I had just delivered. Antonio readjusted and delivered his response. He said, "I love you, and I have no reason to believe that we can't work this out when I get home. But for now, you need to learn how to stay in a child's place. Go talk to Peaches when you leave here. Come back tomorrow and let me know if you've changed your mind. Don't worry about the connects. I'll handle them. I love you. See you tomorrow, Star." I told Antonio that I would see him in a week. I sometimes replay his words in my mind. "I love you. See you tomorrow, Star." There was something about the way he said it. It was ominous in nature. I couldn't put my finger on it at the time. Just as he was walking away, Antonio turned and addressed me one final time. He said, "Don't forget to set up that meeting with your point A. It's going to be a cold day in purgatory. Make sure your Diablo has a jacket." Chapter 20, Stern Warnings. Narrated by Shandora Warren. Music by Epidemic Sound. I thought about my conversation with Antonio for the entire 30-minute drive back. It was cute that he still professed his love for me in the midst of his personal crisis. Even more, it was obvious that he knew about me and Angel. All things considered, Antonio made it obvious that he still wanted to be with me. And if I had to be honest, I wanted to be with him too. Angel was powerful and assertive, but he wasn't Antonio. Angel didn't love me, and I knew it. He had a wife and a family. We were mutually beneficial, but I wouldn't ever be anything more to him than what I was at that moment. That point wasn't ever lost upon me. Antonio loved me, and he made sure that I knew it. He made it obvious that he intended to step back in, and I had every intention of letting him. It was settled. Angel and I would do business, but everything else would be shut down when Antonio came home. I giggled a little when I thought about how Antonio and I played off of each other. I also giggled when I thought of how Antonio once insisted that he wouldn't allow anyone else to sleep with me. Not only had he allowed it, but he basically accepted it. I laughed at the fact that I was terrified about my meeting with Antonio. It had gone better than I could have ever imagined, but all things considered, I knew it wasn't a game. In spite of how the conversation had gone, the visit restored some things that I had lost for Antonio, the biggest of which was respect. I respected Antonio, but I didn't take him seriously. I had worked hard to build my business, and I had no intention of just signing it over. I certainly had no intention of pairing him with Angel. In my heart, I wondered if I was willing to give up Antonio's business. I had worked hard for them too. Antonio said that he would handle the connects. As far as I was concerned, he would straighten things out with them, and I would help him start over when he was released. I would give him what was owed to him, just as he had done for me. No more, no less. I began to think about taking over Antonio's businesses after his release. A part of me was tickled about the prospect of us switching roles. Antonio would come home from prison, and I would upgrade his wardrobe and take him out on dates. I was more than willing to replace Sharon's salon, but I'd make him ask, just because. I entertained the laugh, but I didn't take the idea seriously either. Antonio wouldn't ever hear such a thing, and I knew it. What I did take seriously was the intimidation factor. Peaches' actions showed me that she didn't fear me. That was the difference between how people dealt with me and how people dealt with Antonio. Antonio wasn't intimidating in stature, but he was stern. I could tell that he intimidated other people. Initially, he intimidated me as well. People respected me out of respect for Antonio, but not out of fear. Something about that had to change. I decided to pay Peaches a visit, but not for the reason that Antonio suggested. I decided to pop up and issue a stern warning. If she was at home, I would tough talk her. Knowing that she was wrong, her fear of Antonio would keep her from challenging me. If she wasn't home, I'd wreck her house and leave her a strongly worded note. I know that sounds crazy, but it's a trick of the goons. For some reason, people return to a house in disarray and draw a correlation between what happened to their house and what could happen to their bodies. I guess it makes sense. I arrived at Peaches' apartment complex, and I noticed that her car was still in her parking spot. In spite of my perceived rashness, I wasn't really confrontational. I was disappointed to have had to go the stern warning route. I walked to the door and knocked. Great, I thought. Either Peaches didn't want to face me, or she had really skipped town. I looked under the welcome mat. As usual, her spare key was still there. Peaches was predictable in that way. I went back to the car to put on gloves and to write the note. After folding it neatly, I wrote Peaches' name on the exterior, and I walked back to the door. I knocked again, giving Peaches an opportunity to open the door on her own accord. To no avail, of course. I retrieved the key from under the mat. The moment I walked in, I knew that someone had already beaten me to the punch. Peaches' apartment was completely trashed. It looked like the work of Antonio's goons. One way to know for sure was to check for notes. The usual places were refrigerators, televisions, and bedroom mirrors, anywhere where the victim would likely look upon their return. I walked through the mess and made my way to the kitchen. There were dirty dishes in the sink, and that really stood out. Peaches was a meticulous cleaner. I blamed the goons for most of the mess, but it wasn't like Peaches to leave dishes in the sink. She usually washed them immediately after each meal. She hated dirty dishes. I left the kitchen and headed to the bathroom. Again, the space was destroyed, but there was no note. The only place left to search was Peaches' bedroom. I already knew I'd find more destruction, but I was also hoping to find a definitive answer to whether it was our goons or one of the connects. Considering the fact that Antonio had sent me there, I was placing my bet on him. I slowly opened the door to Peaches' bedroom. Unlike the rest of the house, the bedroom was pristine, just as she would have kept it. There was no sign that anyone had been there, not even Peaches. I searched her drawers and mirrors and found no note. Maybe it wasn't the work of the goons. I hadn't ever known them to destroy a house without leaving a note. I thought for a moment. Peaches' bathroom was the only room left. I went into the bathroom to read the note that I knew I would find. I did find a note. I also found Peaches and Sticks in the bathtub, naked, with bags over their faces. They were parallel to each other, face to face. Peaches' left arm was resting on her hip. Prominently displayed was the left heart, one half of the friendship bracelet that she had purchased for us. I can't explain why, but I removed my glove and unlatched Peaches' bracelet. Her arm was still warm, really warm. Unable to control my bodily functions, I vomited into the toilet. I stared at their bodies. I knew the images would be burned into my mind forever, but I needed to see them. I needed to see Peaches while she was still warm. I needed to see her for the last time. I lifted the bag to display her face. Peaches' mouth was agape. Her pupils had rolled. I could only see the white parts of her eyes, which had broken blood vessels running throughout them. So many thoughts flashed through my mind. Seeing her naked body made me think of her in her prime. I remember the tales of Peaches once being the it girl that all the men wanted. I remember watching her dance and being envious of her perfect body. She was so fun. She was once so full of life, and she was gone. My eyes saw it all, but my heart and my mind couldn't process it. Life wouldn't ever be the same. I retrieved the note that was taped to the mirror. I put it in my back pocket, along with the note that I had intended to leave for Peaches. I ran to my car, hoping that I hadn't been seen. Remembering nothing of the ride, I drove to my hotel in complete silence. Once inside, I locked the hotel room door and pushed the couch in front of it, as if that would stop someone who had an intention to harm me. I collapsed into the bed and sobbed loudly. Peaches was gone. She was really gone. I retrieved both notes from my pocket. My hands were shaking, so much so that I could barely open the envelope. I finally got it open, fully expecting a harshly worded threat to anyone who had assisted Peaches. Instead, I found that it was meant for me. The note said, "Remember not to get so far ahead of yourself that you get left behind." I caught a falling star and put it in my pocket, hopefully saving it for a rainy day. Love always, your Anemone. P.S. I really wish I had gotten you a poodle instead of a feral dog. Things became even more real in that moment. Without a shadow of a doubt, I knew that Antonio had sent the goons to Peaches. Not only that, but I knew that he had ordered the hit and had it executed in the 30 minutes that it took for me to drive from the prison. 3 very distinct thoughts crossed my mind. 1. The goons still belonged to Antonio, very much so. 2. Antonio could touch me at any time, and he wouldn't hesitate to do so. 3. I had to get some rest, as I had to visit Antonio bright and early the next morning. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to follow Shenny Tells a Story on Facebook and Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. If you're interested in purchasing books by Shandora Warren, they're all available on Amazon in ebook, paperback, and some in hardback formats. Thank you for helping me to create the world that I want to see. Oh yeah, you're welcome. Shine, little girl.